We are back in Psalm 14, or 13 in the Greek, and we're in the second part of our study of verse 3. Introduced in the prior video, this very complicated situation here, and it's a very long verse for a variety of reasons. So let's get into it, make some translation here, talk about Romans, and then that'll set the stage for the special video coming next. Augzeis hoi pades auton echea haima. Suntrema kai taleoporia in tais hadois auton, ke hadon erenes uk egnosan, uk estin phabas theou apenanti ton ophthalmon auton. Now, to remind you that this entire thing, all of the lines I just read, are not in the Masoretic or other sources. I'll get into that soon, and so we'll cover that in a future video. So really, this whole video is not this whole half of a verse. And some of the stuff in the prior verse is not found in a lot of the traditions. It's only found in certain parts of the Greek world. So let's take a look at it. Augzeis here means swift or perhaps sharp typically, but we'll go with swift here because of the nature of the metaphor. Hoi pades auton, so their feet are swift, if you will. And then echei here is from echeo. This is an aorist active infinitive. You can see the ai ending. And so they are swift to do what? To pour out or to shed. So pour out or to shed. And what are they shedding? Blood. So again, referring back to the foolish person who has left devastation in their wake and all their paths are bad. Here's what else they do. They pour out or they are quick to shed blood. A violent overtone, of course, there. Then suntrema, that means a fracture typically, but you could also say something like ruin or misery, devastation, something like that. And tyloporia, that also is something like misery. In tes hadois auton, in their paths. So they leave fractures and misery in their paths. And then the hadon erenes, the way of peace. So they have their own path, and it's bad. It leads to these bad things. There's a different path. It's the way of peace. In fact, you might even argue that these two paths here are kind of an echo of Psalm 1. Anyway, the way of peace, uk egnosan, that's a third plural aorist active indicative from gnosko. So we've seen a lot of aorist in this psalm as a way of categorizing holistically or perfectively the nature of what it's like to be a person like this. They do not know the way of peace. Then uk estin, we've seen a lot of uk estins also in Psalm 14/13. There is not fear of God. Then apenanti, that means before, and that's not a chronological before. That's something like in the presence of, and it does take the genitive. So before or in the presence of their eyes. So the fear of God, which is the source of all wisdom, of course, is not before their eyes. That explains some things. That explains why their paths are so bad. Not only do they not believe in God, we saw that in verse 1, they do not fear God either. Now, again, this probably sounds familiar because this is the last bit of that big chunk in Romans 3 that we've been looking at, verses 15 through 18. We have exactly verbatim what we've just seen. So we got the feet are swift to shed blood. We saw that. In their paths, the hadois there are ruin and misery. The way of peace they have not known, with the egnos on there, and that there is no fear of God before their eyes. So we've got to come back to all this in the very next video. What's happening with this mega verse and its duplication, if you will, in Romans 3. So the next video is going to cover that, but thanks for following along. That ends Psalm 14, verse 3 for now. We'll come back to verse 4 after a brief pause, taking a look at what's going on here with this connection to Romans 3. So thank you for your attention.